I just saw an exclusive preview screening of Wicked for Good. These are my thoughts. Now, if you have seen the musical before but haven't seen the movie, I'm going to try and keep this as spoiler-free as possible in regard to the specific changes to the movie. However, if you're not familiar with the story of Act 2, then I would advise watching the movie first and then coming back to this, because this review will be containing major spoilers of the story. So the main strength of this movie is just how much it fleshes out Act 2. Obviously, from memory, I think Act 2 is only about an hour and 15, so obviously there's a lot of story that they cram in such a short time, and so it does feel very rushed. A lot of the story beats get rushed and not really explained properly, so I think the idea of putting into a second movie and really fleshing out some of these story beats and making it more coherent, I think definitely helped in terms of certain characters' backstories. Minor spoilers, they have a little bit of Glinda's backstory, particularly at the start and at the end as well. We get a lot more of the animal story, which obviously we had a little bit more in the first movie, but particularly in the second movie, it really makes you empathize with these characters even more. And we've got 2 brand new songs as well, one of Glinda and one of Elphaba, which allows both of these characters to be fleshed out even more. I particularly liked Elphaba's new song, There's No Place Like Home, because it really fleshes out why Elphaba is continuing to fight for this land, why she's still staying in Oz, and why she wants to defend it so much. In terms of the actual music of the new songs, I feel like they need time to grow on me, because at the moment they're not really standing out to me. They don't have distinct melodies like some of the other songs in the show. I only listened to them once in the actual movie, so once it comes out in streaming, I'll listen to it more and I'll see what I think then. I saw this tweet earlier this week about how Act 2 has no memorable songs, which isn't true regardless, because no good deed and as long as your mind exists, and for good. And there's another tweet which was like, composers over 70 can't make any good songs anymore or something. I was like, I don't know if that's true, and then I heard these new songs and I'm like, yeah, they're not that memorable. They serve their role in the movie, that's for sure, but I don't know how much we'll be able to sing along to it going forward. Another change to the soundtrack as well, which has already been officially released, is that they split the first song into 2 songs. So instead of just Thank Goodness, there's Every Day More Wicked and then Thank Goodness, because it allows for a lot more scene in between the 2 of them. It's a good change. I think it definitely helps establish the narrative to the audience. Obviously, it's not like going to a musical where you have a 20-minute intermission so you easily remember what happened in the first act. It's been a year since some of these people in the audience have seen the first movie, so they have to basically retell some of the story, which is effective, but it also is kind of to the detriment of the movie, because it does kind of make the introduction a lot slower than it does in the musical, where it just goes bang, on track, into Thank Goodness, into the celebrations, and then straight into Elphaba and so on, whereas this kind of needs a lot more time to set up. So I think the first, so I think the first sort of 5, 10, honestly, even up to Wonderful, I think it's quite a bit of a slow start to the movie, but overall, I think the pacing compared to the musical is much better, because there is a lot more breathing room. And I also do think they even cut some of Michelle Yeoh's singing from Thank Goodness, because she's not a good singer. We all know that. I think she'll admit that. I mean, she's definitely a good actress in the movie, but in terms of her singing, I don't know if that's the strongest part. Which is another thing, is that it's great that there is only one actress that can't sing. That sounds really bad. But I just mean, like, most of these movie musicals have actors that aren't really known to be singers, whereas this has Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, Ethan Slater, who was on Broadway, Jonathan Bailey, who was on West End, and so on. So it's really great. You could hear these as singers singing live. Even though the term live is a bit taken out of context, because yes, it is sung live on set, but it's obviously pitch recorded and they choose their best takes for, release. It's not like a musical where it's just one take and released. I digress. As I said about Wonderful, there's obviously this recurring joke in musical theatre history that there's always this, like, one song in each movie or musical that has, like, an old man singing. We all know that's what Wonderful is. The trailers did spoil, though, that Glinda will be in this song, so I knew that'd be a little bit better, and obviously it was. It still was a bit of a drag, that whole song, and even just the whole scene in general, in my opinion. Until that final part when all the colours come up and they're dancing and everything, I love that moment, and then from then on the movie is just constantly fast-paced and full of fun. But I love the visuals in that scene. I think the visuals overall in this movie were a lot better than the first movie, a lot more colour, I noticed. Until, of course, film Twitter starts nitpicking that and pulling separate screenshots apart. So maybe we'll wait and see if I change my opinion on that. But so far, I think the visuals are great in this movie. I think John Number 2 hopefully did listen to feedback there. But by far, in my opinion, the best moment visually in the movie was No Good Deed. It's not only the best visually, it was the best musically, it was the best vocally, it was the best dramatically. Overall, I just genuinely, I wish there was a camera on me in that scene, because I was absolutely gagging in my seat. She did some opt-ups. The Fiera opt-up, I don't think you guys are ready for that. You are not ready. I was gagging in my seat. I was so close to actually just wanting to do a standing ovation mid-cinema, which nobody else was even clapping. But genuinely, absolute chills. And I always say that, but I mean it this time. Like, genuinely, Cynthia Erivo's No Good Deed changed my life. And also just, it felt epic. There were 2 moments in this movie that I absolutely wanted to have the same effect that it did on Broadway. I mean, I haven't seen it on Broadway, but Melbourne. My word sense. Which is, I want it to feel the same as No Good Deed felt in the theatre. It did. It honestly felt better because it had the visuals to go along with it. It felt very cinematic. That's what I loved about this platform, because it actually allows you to have these cinematic moments that you can't have on stage. As much as I love the stage format in terms of, actor-audience relationship and so on, but you have, like, big spectacle stuff on screen. You have CGI, you have a lot more of Alphaba flying, which you don't see in the second act at all. You have tigers and animals and lions and stuff like actually speaking and moving, so it feels a lot more real in the movie, and also you get a lot of facial expressions. But yeah, so No Good Deed was one of the moments it had to nail in my opinion, and I think the film medium particularly helped No Good Deed because they allowed for a lot of interesting directorial choices and a lot of visual parallels to certain lyrics that you wouldn't be able to do on stage otherwise. And the other moment was like the moment where they have that argument and that bitch slap. And everyone was talking about like, are they gonna like simplify that for the movie or cut some of it because it's very cheesy, it's on stage. Majority of it still made it to the film, which I loved. I loved that it kept that campiness while adding some certain stuff to that scene as well, which I won't spoil. That was absolutely necessary for me, and I'm glad that it's now those 2 ticks for me. Overall, the vocal choices in this movie were great. I think Cynthia Erivo particularly like understands exactly what the score needs. She sees where there is room for ornamentation and room for movement and, you know, the malleable nature of the score, but also sees what has to stay there because it's an iconic score and it's important to the story. I think also it helps that Stephen Schwartz is very involved in the process of this movie making as opposed to like a random night on Broadway. But my point being is that the score has a lot of changes, but it also is very familiar. My issue with the first movie, particularly Dancing Through Life, now this could just be because I'm so familiar with a Broadway score, is that it changed a lot of the orchestration. And even like there's one bar specifically in The Wizard and I, which is my biggest pet peeve, because before the line for Half of Oz's favourite team, there's like this bar where she jumps up and she flies on the cliff. It drives me up the wall because I just want to hear The Wizard and I that I know and love, that just is consistent. And even like Defying Gravity, they broke up a lot for dramatic purposes in the movie. There weren't any particular moments in this movie where I noticed that being an issue. As I said, thank goodness was maybe the only exception. They broke it up a lot. But overall it's very consistent. Except, spoiler alert, I'm saying this after I've already said it, but except they got rid of the Fiero transition from I'm Not That Girl into No Good Deed. That really annoyed me. That was the only thing about No Good Deed that I was a bit disappointed by. As Long As Your Mind was very cool on stage, obviously Jonathan Bailey, obviously. But also, there was one moment he did a little bit of, this is a really nerdy thing, really like nitpicky, but he did a bit of a falsetto at the start of his singing as opposed to just belting, which is how it's done on Broadway. Like, I want to hear that tenor. I know it's in you, Jonathan Bailey, I want to hear it. The one thing I will say about vocal choices is, only in Thank Goodness did I hear Ariana. I felt like Glinda kind of just left her for a whole chorus. She was just like belting like she's pop. And there was also riffs as well that was very Ariana, like positions core, as opposed to Glinda. I feel like she just lost the character there. That's like the only moment in the entire movie I noticed that. But I think that Glinda just left her. In my opinion, it could change again upon re-listening. But in the moment I was like, oh, where is Glinda right here? Now, I've seen a lot of discourse about, you know, the first movie being a lot of Alphaba's story, and then the second movie is about Glinda's story. I disagree with that. I think both characters shine here. I think the term Wicked for Good obviously talks about both the things they're both singing that song, but it's also just about what does Wicked mean for Alphaba. She's finally like accepting that's who she is. No Good Deed obviously really fleshes that out. Or is it Glinda's desire for power and jealousy that ultimately is her fatal flaw, and that's what makes her wicked? That's the whole question here, and I think it applies to both of these characters who share equal leads. Obviously, when applying for the Oscars, you can't submit them both, but I do think that they are equal leads, in my opinion, to the story and in terms of screen time as well. And I think that's also emphasized by both of the characters having new songs. Another criticism I have with Girl in the Bubble was that I feel like it kind of reiterates character beats that we already know, that it's about Glinda wanting her time to shine but feeling isolated and not really knowing how to go about, you know, the new fame that she has. And I think a lot of that is kind of already shown, and thank goodness, throughout the entire movie. All it really does in the song is just put in a metaphor. That's another criticism as well I have with the song. Talking about Oscars though, I do think Ariana is definitely Oscar worthy here. I was a bit critical in the first movie. Like, I think they both gave great performances, but I think Ariana particularly was getting quite overrated reviews. I think she was a really, really strong performer, but I don't know if she was Oscar worthy. Cynthia, there's a case for that, 100%. Ariana, I don't know. I think this movie definitely cements her as more of an Oscar chance in my opinion. Cynthia as well, she's always amazing. She's always going to be amazing in this movie, she was. But Ariana really stepped it up in this movie, in my opinion. And another underrated actor is Ethan Slater. I know people like to shit on him, and, you know, putting aside his personal drama, he is a great performer. He was amazing as SpongeBob. You can also say what you want about that show, but he was amazing in that. He got Tony nominated for a reason. He was amazing in this. We all knew that March of the Witch Hunters would be amazing, and it was. I thought he was basically unrecognizable as Spock when he became the Tin Man. Spoiler alert. Actually, if you made it this far, you know about that. Also, this just reminds me in post of how weird the prosthetic for the Scarecrow looked on screen. I don't know if it's just me that's thinking that, or maybe it's because they're covering Jonathan Bailey's face. I'm not sure. But yeah, it just looked really weird, especially compared to Alphaba. And also, Marissa Brode as Nessa. And also, one of the big changes to the movie that everyone was wondering how they would do it was about Nessa being able to walk in the musical. I'm not going to spoil how they did that. Now, it's not really my community, so I can't really comment on it. I think it made sense within the context of it. Whether or not it's accepted, that's a different story. That's not my case to make. It made sense in terms of the actual story itself, and I personally didn't have an issue with it, which is not really important whatsoever. Well, anyway, the final thing I was going to say was about the incorporation of The Wizard of Oz. We've seen the trailers. Everyone was wondering, will Dorothy be in it? Will she be speaking much? I'm not going to say. If you've been reading the interviews, you already know the answer, which, let's just say, how do I say this? The character of Dorothy appears. That's all I'll say about that. I really liked how they did that, and they didn't really focus too much on the Wizard of Oz characters, but they did definitely include them, and they show the parallels between the movie and the musical. There is also like the very opening scene, which shows more of like the lore behind the Wizard of Oz and Oz particularly, in terms of how certain things were created. That's all I'll say about that as well. I really liked that, and that segued into, thank goodness, or what was it called? Every Day More Wicked. I also forgot to mention like the added scenes that they did at the end after Alphaba was revealed to be alive, and there's this like really wholesome moment. And I really loved how they extended the ending. In particular, there's an Easter egg I really loved. That was a beautiful ending to the movie. But yeah, that is my overall review. I really, really loved this, particularly No Good Deed. I also forgot to mention For Good, how emotional that was. But obviously the song's emotional, but there is a specific moment that happens after that involving a certain door. Oh my goodness. I don't cry much in movies and musicals, but I was super, super close. So bring tissues if you're watching this before you've seen it. Wow, that was... wow. But yeah, I loved it. Whether or not I loved it more than part one, it's hard to say. I think musically, the first act will always be better, in my opinion. There are obviously bangers in the second act, but not as many. I think the scale of the second one was better, the visuals were better. But story-wise, I think the first is just more cohesive. Not to say that the second one isn't cohesive, I just think the first one is more. I loved most of the additions to the movie, other than the 2 songs, which I've already said. I don't know how I feel about them yet. I'll have to really sit with those. At the moment, they really feel like, well, at least the second one really just feels like Oscar bait to me. But yeah, thank you for watching this review. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy Wicked for Good when it comes out and you get the chance to see it. And then come back to this video to let me know what you think. Follow me for more Aussie musical theatre news and reviews.